The dim haze of cigarette smoke hung heavy in the air of Rusty's Roadhouse, a weathered dive on the edge of the Nevada Badlands where the jukebox wailed forgotten country anthems and the scent of stale beer mingled with the faint tang of desert dust tracked in on scuffed boots. Neon signs flickered above the scarred wooden bar, casting erratic red and blue glows over a crowd of locals nursing their regrets. Truckers with calloused hands, ranch hands with sun-leathered faces, and the occasional drifter chasing shadows. It was the kind of place where stories simmered unspoken, where a man's past could hide in the clink of ice in a glass. But tonight, the air crackled with something sharper, something primed to ignite. In the corner booth, under the relentless buzz of a Miller Lite sign, sat Marcus Hale, the undisputed king of the regional MMA circuit. Broad-shouldered and etched with tattoos that snaked up his arms like victory scars, Marcus was holding court with a half-dozen hangers-on, his voice booming over the din as he recounted his latest triumph, a brutal cage fight in Reno that had left his opponent crumpled and the crowd roaring. "Guy thought he could take me down with some fancy leg lock," Marcus laughed, slamming his beer bottle down hard enough to send foam spilling. "I wrapped him up like a damn pretzel. Next one's Vegas, baby. Title shot. Who's buying the next round?" His entourage erupted in cheers, but his eyes scanned the room with the predatory gleam of a man who owned every inch he surveyed. Marcus thrived on dominance, on the thrill of breaking wills as easily as bones, and in a backwater joint like this, he was untouchable. That's when the door swung open with a groan, letting in a rush of cool night air, laced with the low rumble of a Harley engine fading into silence outside. Ethan Carver stepped in, his silhouette cutting through the haze like a ghost from another era. At 42, Ethan was a relic of the open road. Leather vest patched with the faded emblem of the Iron Vipers, a motorcycle club that whispered legends in biker circles. His face was a map of hard miles, a jagged scar tracing his jaw from a long-ago brawl, salt and pepper hair tied back in a loose ponytail, and eyes the color of storm clouds, steady and unreadable. He moved with the deliberate grace of someone who'd stared down worse than barroom bravado, his boots thudding softly against the sticky floor as he made for the bar. No fanfare, no swagger, just a man ordering a black coffee, blacker than the secrets he carried. Marcus spotted him first, his laughter dying into a smirk as he elbowed his buddy. "Check out Grizzly Adams over there." "What? You lose your way to the zoo, old man?" The booth exploded in snickers, heads turning as Marcus rose, all 6'3" of him unfolding like a predator scenting weakness. He sauntered over, beer in hand, towering over Ethan, who hadn't even glanced up from his steaming mug. "Hey, biker boy, that rust bucket outside yours? Looks like it belongs in a museum or a scrapyard. You ride that thing to compensate for something?" The bar fell into a hush, the jukebox's twang the only sound punctuating the tension. Ethan's hand paused mid-sip, but he didn't flinch, didn't rise to the bait. Not yet. The mockery escalated, Marcus leaning in closer, his voice dripping venom. "Come on, say something. Or are you too busy polishing your midlife crisis?" A few patrons shifted uncomfortably, sensing the storm brewing, but no one intervened, not in a place where fists wrote the rules. Ethan finally looked up, his gaze locking onto Marcus's with a quiet intensity that made the fighter's smirk falter for a split second. "Son," Ethan said, his voice low and gravel-rough like tires on gravel at dawn. "I've broken more men than you've dreamed of, but I don't waste words on echoes." The bar held its breath, Marcus's face flushing red as he shoved Ethan's shoulder hard enough to rattle the stool. "You threatening me? I could snap you like a twig, Grandpa." But in that charged moment, as Marcus's entourage egged him on and the bartender froze with a rag in hand, Ethan's mind flashed back, not to bar fights or club runs, but to a promise etched in blood and fire 15 years ago. It was a vow made in the dim glow of a hospital room, To a brother in arms, dying too young, from wounds sustained in a desert war they both barely survived. "Watch over my boy if I don't make it home," the man had whispered, clutching Ethan's hand. "He's got fire in him, but the world's got wolves. Promise me." Ethan had nodded, the weight of it settling like chains he couldn't shake. He'd kept his distance, letting the kid forge his own path. But fate had a way of circling back, and now staring at Marcus Hale, the same Marcus Hale whose father had been that brother, the fighter carrying the same reckless fire, Ethan realized the promise wasn't buried. It was alive, demanding he step in before the wolves closed in. Marcus laughed, but it rang hollow, his shove turning into a jab at Ethan's chest. "Big talk from a has-been. You know who I am? Pro circuit champ. You'd be lucky to last 10 seconds. Ethan's scar twitched, a ghost of old pain, but he stood slowly, unfolding to his full height, not as bulky as Marcus, but solid, unyielding, like forged steel. The bar's neon flickered, casting shadows that danced across his vest, highlighting the iron viper's patch. A coiled serpent, symbol of loyalty forged in the crucible of loss. 10 seconds, Ethan murmured, stepping closer, his presence filling the space like thunder on the horizon. "Boy, I trained with men who made you look like a shadow puppet. And your father. He was one of them." The name hit like a gut punch. Marcus's eyes widened, the color draining from his face as recognition dawned. The old stories his mum had told, the biker uncle who'd vanished after the funeral, the one who'd promised to watch out, but never showed. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "That's Carver, the Viper." Ethan didn't back down, his voice steady as he leaned in. "You mock what you don't understand. But blood calls to blood, and promises don't die easy. Walk away, kid, before this turns into something neither of us wants." The fighter hesitated, fist clenched, the bar teetering on the edge of chaos. Outside, the wind howled through the Badlands, carrying the faint echo of engines. Brothers who would ride if called, a family chosen in ink and oath. In that frozen instant, Marcus realized he wasn't facing some washed-up drifter. He was staring down a legend, a man who'd buried ghosts deeper than his own arrogance could reach. The promise Ethan carried wasn't just words. It was a lifeline, a redemption waiting in the dust. And as the door creaked open again, admitting the silhouette of another Viper scout, the night shifted from mockery to reckoning, from barroom bluster to the unbreakable pull of honor long overdue. The door's creak sliced through the tension like a knife, and in stepped Jax Harlan, another Iron Viper, his frame lean and wiry from years of scouting desert runs. Jax's eyes, sharp as flint, under a shaved head etched with tribal ink, flicked from the frozen standoff to Ethan, reading the room in an instant. He didn't rush in with fists flying. Vipers didn't brawl for sport. They moved for purpose. Jax paused by the entrance, his leather creaking softly, the faint scent of engine oil and road tar clinging to him like a second skin. Outside, the Nevada night pressed against the windows, stars pinpricks in a vast black canvas, whispering of journeys unfinished. Marcus's breath hitched, his bravado cracking like dry earth under boot heels. The name, his father's name, hung in the air, unspoken now, but heavy as the dust storms that choked the Badlands. He'd grown up on fragments of stories. A war hero dad who'd come home in a box, a biker uncle who'd sworn an oath and then ghosted into legend. Mom had kept a faded photo, Ethan in fatigues beside his father, both grinning like they owned the world before it broke them. Marcus had shoved those memories into the cage with him, fueling his rage-fueled rise in the MMA ranks. But here, under the bar's stuttering neon, they clawed back to life. You're him, Marcus muttered, his voice a rasp, fist unclenching as confusion warred with the fighter's instinct to swing. The entourage at the booth shifted, murmurs rippling like wind through sagebrush, some backing away, others leaning in, drawn to the unraveling drama. Ethan held his ground, the coffee mug warm in his calloused palm, steam curling up like ghosts from the past. He could see the flicker in Marcus's eyes, the same wild fire his father had carried, tempered now by scars Ethan didn't yet know. 15 years ago, in that sterile hospital room reeking of antiseptic and regret, Sergeant Hale had gripped his hand with fading strength. "Ethan, brother, if I go, promise you'll look out for the kid. Marcus, he's got my fight, but not my sense. Don't let the world grind him down." Ethan had nodded, throat tight, the beeps of monitors underscoring the vow. He'd honored it from afar, tracking the boy's path through whispers from old contacts, seeing him climb the fight circuit like a storm. But distance had its limits, and tonight, fate had dragged the promise into the light, raw and demanding. Jax edged closer, his presence a quiet reinforcement, boots silent on the worn linoleum. He nodded once to Ethan, a silent signal. Club's ears are open. Riders on standby if you call. The Iron Vipers weren't outlaws in the old sense. They were guardians of oaths, a brotherhood forged in the fires of war and loss, patching roads and pulling families from wrecks when the law turned a blind eye. Ethan's vest bore the serpent emblem, not for glory, but for the men it represented. Brothers like Hale, whose blood now echoed in this cocky fighter's veins. "Easy, Jax," Ethan said softly, never breaking eye contact with Marcus. "This ain't about clubs or cages. It's about blood." The bar's hush deepened, the jukebox clicking to a halt mid-note, leaving only the hum of the fridge and the distant howl of coyotes. Marcus stepped back, chest heaving, the shove's echo still vibrating in his knuckles. He'd mocked a drifter, but now he faced a reckoning, a man who'd walked through hells he could only shadowbox against. "Why now?" Marcus demanded, voice cracking with the vulnerability of a boy peeking through the champ's armor. "Dad died. You vanished. Mom said you promised. Where the hell were you?" The question landed like a haymaker, raw and unanswered, drawing sympathetic glances from the locals who'd lost kin to the same unforgiving sands. Ethan's scar pulled tight as he set the mug down, the ceramic clinking like a gavel. Memories flooded in unbidden, the convoy ambushed in the dunes, bullets whining like angry hornets, Hale dragging him from a burning Humvee, blood soaking the sand. They'd made it stateside, but Hale hadn't. Ethan had ridden out to the funeral, stood in the shadows as the boy, Marcus, all of 7, clutching a folded flag, stared blankly at the casket. Keeping the promise meant staying away, letting the kid build his own armor, not shadowing him like a ghost. But the Viper's code was clear. Oaths didn't fade, they waited. "I was where I needed to be," Ethan replied. His tone steady as a low-revving engine, watching, waiting for the call. "Your fire's strong, kid, but it's burning unchecked. That cage you're chasing, it eats souls. Your dad knew that. He fought for more than wins." Marcus's entourage hovered, uncertain, one of them muttering about calling it a night. The bartender, a grizzled woman named Rita, with lines etched deep from too many closing shifts, slid a fresh coffee Ethan's way on the house, her eyes saying, "Trouble's brewing. But this feels right." Jax leaned against a post, arms crossed, his silence a wall of loyalty. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose pane, carrying the promise of rain-scented air. A rarity in these parts. Like hope in a dry spell. The fighter swallowed hard, the bar's haze seeming thicker, pressing in on the truth unfolding. He'd built his life on takedowns and knockouts. But this was a different fight. One of ghosts and guardians, where victory meant facing the man his father trusted. "What do you want from me?" Marcus asked, the words tumbling out. laced with the fear of a legacy he wasn't ready to claim. Ethan's gaze softened just a fraction, the storm clouds in his eyes clearing to reveal the depth of a brother's bond. Nothing you can't give. A chance to honor what he left behind. Ride with me tomorrow, see the road your dad dreamed of, before the wolves circle closer. As the words settled, the door swung again, not with threat, but with the low growl of more engines idling in the lot. Word had spread through the Viper network, a text chain lighting up phones like fireflies, riders gathering, not for war, but for witness. Marcus glanced out, seeing silhouettes in the moonlight, leather-clad figures, engines purring like patient beasts. The mockery of minutes ago felt like a lifetime distant, replaced by the pull of something ancient, unbreakable. The promise wasn't a chain, it was a key, unlocking doors to redemption neither had sought. And in that neon-lit limbo, as the first drops of rain pattered against the tin roof, Marcus nodded. Once, tentative, the first step on a path that would bind biker and fighter in ways the Badlands themselves couldn't erode. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The rain came down in earnest now, a rare desert downpour that turned the Badlands into a slick, shimmering veil under the sodium glow of the roadhouse sign. It drummed against the tin roof like impatient fingers, washing away the dust of the day and stirring the scent of wet sagebrush through the cracked windows. Inside Rusty's, the tension lingered, like the haze of smoke, but it had shifted, from the sharp edge of confrontation to the quiet hum of possibility. Marcus Hale stood there, his broad frame silhouetted against the neon flicker, raindrops beading on his shaved head, where he'd stepped out briefly to clear his thoughts. The fighter's eyes, still stormy with the remnants of his earlier fire, met Ethan's once more, the nod he'd given hanging between them like an unspoken contract. Ethan Carver felt the weight of it settle deeper. The promise from that hospital bedside 15 years gone, pulling taut like a guy line in the wind. He'd ridden solo for so long, the Iron Viper's serpent emblem on his vest more a talisman than a call to arms, but this was the oath demanding more than shadows. Jax Harlan clapped a hand on Ethan's shoulder, light but firm, his wiry frame a steady anchor. "Road's callin', brother," Jax murmured, voice low enough for only them to hear, the words carrying the rumble of engines outside. The lot was filling now, headlights cutting through the sheets of rain like beacons, a dozen Vipers at least, pulling up in formation, their bikes gleaming wet under the storm. Not an invasion, but a gathering, the kind that spoke of loyalty, tested and true. Marcus wiped the rain from his face, glancing back at his entourage, who hovered awkwardly by the booth like extras in a scene they'd lost the script for. The laughter from earlier had evaporated, replaced by uneasy glances and half-hearted mutters about heading out. One of them, a stocky guy with a fresh cage fight bruise blooming on his cheek, stepped forward hesitantly. "Marcus, man, you good. This guy's intense." But Marcus waved him off, the champ's armor cracking further as he turned to Ethan. "Ride with you? Just like that? I've got a fight in 2 days. Qualifier for Vegas. Trainers breathing down my neck, scouts watching every move. What the hell does a road trip fix?" Ethan's gaze didn't waver, the scar along his jaw catching the blue neon like a silver thread. He remembered Hale's voice in that desert outpost, gravelly even then, before the shrapnel took its toll. "The kid's got heart, Ethan, but heart without roots, it withers." The Vipers had been his roots after the war, a patchwork family of vets and wanderers who traded fatigues for leather, pulling each other from the wreckage of civilian life. Ethan had scouted for them, ridden aid runs to forgotten towns, honored the fallen by living the code. But Marcus, the boy's path had veered into the cage's glare, where glory was measured in blood and cheers, not quiet oaths. It fixes nothing overnight, Ethan said, his tone even as the rain's rhythm. But it shows you what your dad fought for. Not the spotlight, the stand. Come dawn, we ride to the old Overlook, where he and I planned our first stateside run. You decide after that. The door banged open again, admitting a gust of cool, ozone-scented air, and another viper. This one a woman named Lena Torres. Her dark hair slicked back under a helmet, rain dripping from her jacket. Lena was club medic, hands steady from patching road rash and worse, her eyes carrying the same quiet resolve as Ethan's. She nodded to Marcus, no judgment, just assessment, seeing the fighter's clenched jaw, the flicker of doubt beneath the bravado. "Bikes are warmed," she said simply, tossing Ethan a spare helmet. The gesture was small, but it bridged worlds, the cage's isolation against the road's communion. Marcus caught it mid-air, the weight foreign in his grip, like holding a piece of his father's ghost. Outside, the rain softened to a patter, the lot a symphony of idling engines and muffled conversations. The vipers formed a loose circle, leathers glistening, sharing smokes and stories under the overhang, tales of lost brothers, redemptions snatched from the jaws of despair. Jax filled them in quietly, the network alive with the promise's echo. Hale's boy, oath calls. No one questioned it. That's what family chosen meant, stepping in when blood alone faltered. Marcus stepped out into the downpour, the chill biting through his thin shirt, but he didn't retreat. The mockery from earlier felt like a bad dream, eroded by the truth Ethan had unearthed. His mom had spoken of this man in hushed tones over kitchen tables scarred by time. The uncle who'd carried her husband's flag, who'd ridden away to grieve in motion. Marcus had dismissed it as myth, fuel for his own rage in the ring. But now, standing amid the growl of Harleys, he felt the pull, a moral gravity he'd ignored too long. Ethan mounted his bike, the familiar creak of the seat a balm against the night's churn. Rain sluiced down the handlebars, mixing with the faint oil sheen, the scent grounding him like an old friend's voice. "Your call, kid," he said over the engine's low purr, extending the invitation like a hand from the past. Marcus hesitated, the helmet dangling from his fingers, the bar's warmth spilling light onto the gravel. Inside, Rita the bartender watched from the window, her rag paused mid-wipe, a knowing smile creasing her face. She'd seen enough lost souls cross her threshold to recognize redemption's first spark. The entourage piled into trucks, engines coughing to life, but Marcus didn't join them. Instead, he swung a leg over the back of Ethan's spare ride, the motion awkward but determined, the rain masking the tremor in his hands. As they pulled out, the convoy formed behind them, a thunderous procession cutting through the storm-washed night, headlights piercing the dark like stars aligned. The Badlands unfolded ahead, vast and unforgiving, sagebrush bowing to the wind. Marcus gripped the sides, the vibration rumbling through his bones, a far cry from the cage's confined fury. Ethan's voice carried back over the roar. "Your dad said the road teaches what fists can't. Patience, the long haul." The words wove into the rain's whisper, stirring something deep in Marcus, an ethical ache he'd buried under knockouts and acclaim. The wolves Ethan spoke of weren't just opponents. They were the corruption creeping into his world, shady promoters promising Vegas gold but delivering chains, the isolation of a life won alone. Miles blurred by, the convoy a serpent uncoiling through the night, loyalty's engine driving them toward the Overlook. There, under the clearing sky, dawn would break with its golden promise, forcing Marcus to confront the legacy he'd mocked. Ethan's oath wasn't about control. It was redemption's quiet forge, hammering fighter into guardian, biker into kin. The rain eased, stars emerging like witnesses, and in that suspended moment, the bond took root, unbreakable, born of honor's silent fire. But as the horizon lightened, a shadow loomed on the road ahead, whispers of trouble in Marcus's fight circuit. Threats from the underbelly that saw his rising star as prey. The promise demanded more than a ride. It called for a stand, justice's blade against the gathering dark. The first hints of dawn crept over the Badlands like a hesitant promise, painting the rain-slicked horizon in strokes of pale gold that chased away the night's lingering shadows. The convoy of iron vipers thrummed through the winding blacktop, engines harmonizing in a low, steady growl that vibrated through Marcus Hale's core, syncing with the unsteady beat of his pulse. He clung to the rear of Ethan's Harley, the wind whipping at his damp clothes, carrying the sharp, clean scent of wet earth and creosote bushes that lined the roadside. It was nothing like the sterile roar of a gym or the thunderous cheers of a cage fight. This was raw, unfiltered motion, the road unfolding like a scroll of forgotten oaths, pulling him deeper into a world he'd dismissed as relic. Ethan rode point, his posture unyielding against the gusts, the serpent patch on his vest catching fleeting glints from the rising sun. Behind them, the Vipers strung out in a disciplined line, Jax Harlan on a sleek black cruiser, Lena Torres flanking the rear with her medical kit strapped tight, and a handful of others whose faces Marcus only glimpsed in the side mirrors. Weathered vets with eyes that held stories of sands far bloodier than these dunes. No one revved for show. This was a ride of purpose, the kind that bound souls tighter than any contract. Marcus's mind raced faster than the bike, fragments of his father's tales resurfacing like debris in a flash flood, nights around the dinner table where Mom would speak of the Vipers as guardians, not gangsters, men who'd pulled her husband from the brink more than once. He'd tuned it out, chasing his own glory, but now the vibration under him felt like judgment, or maybe absolution. They crested a rise, the overlook coming into view, a jagged outcrop of red rock overlooking a vast basin where the Badlands met the sky, a place Ethan had described in hushed tones back at the bar. He signaled a pull-off, the convoy easing to a halt in a gravel turnout that crunched under tires like brittle bones. Engines cut, leaving a profound silence broken only by the drip of residual rain from overhangs and the distant call of a raven. Marcus dismounted stiffly, his legs protesting the unaccustomed ride, muscles tuned for takedowns now humming with a different ache. He handed the helmet back to Ethan, their eyes meeting in the strengthening light. Ethan's steady, Marcus's turbulent, like a storm meeting calm seas. "This is it," Ethan said, gesturing to the edge where a weathered iron cross stood sentinel half-buried in scrub. "Your dad and I came here after our first leave, planned the club run that saved a dozen lives in a dust-up down south. He said the view reminds you, life's not about the summit, it's the stand you take before the fall." The words hung in the crisp air, laced with the faint ozone tang of the storm's aftermath. Marcus approached the cross, his boots scuffing the dirt, fingers tracing the rough metal where names were etched faintly, Hale among them, a silent testament. Memories clashed in his chest, the flag-draped casket, the empty chair at holidays, the way he'd channeled grief into fists that built his empire. But empire felt hollow now, a cage of its own making. Jax and Lena joined them, the group forming a loose semicircle as the sun crested fully, bathing the basin in warm light that turned the rocks to burnished copper. "Oath's what keeps us riding," Jax added, his voice gravelly from years of wind and whispers. "Not for the thrill, for the ones who can't." Lena nodded, pulling a thermos from her saddlebag and pouring steaming coffee into battered mugs, the aroma rich and grounding, steam rising like prayers unspoken. Marcus accepted one, the heat seeping into his palms, mirroring the slow thaw in his guarded heart. He'd mocked this life hours ago, but here, amid the Brotherhood's quiet vigil, it felt like roots he'd never known. Family not by blood, but by the scars they shared. As the group settled on the rocks, stories flowed like the coffee, Ethan's low recount of the ambush that claimed Hale, bullets stitching the air while brothers dragged each other to cover. Jax's tale of a roadside pull that uncovered a family's hidden peril from corrupt hands. Marcus listened, the fighter's edge softening as parallels emerged. His own circuit, where promoters dangled Vegas dreams laced with strings. "There's this guy, Victor Kane," Marcus confessed, voice rough as he stared into the basin. "Runs the qualifiers. Promised me the title shot, but last week, threats. Said if I don't throw a fight, my ride ends. Mom's medical bills piling up. I can't walk." The admission spilled out, vulnerability cracking his champ facade. The sun's warmth doing little to chase the chill of betrayal. Ethan's expression darkened, the scar on his jaw tightening like a drawn bow. He'd heard whispers through old networks. Kane, a shadow in the fight world, peddling fixed bouts and silencing climbers with veiled warnings. The Vipers had crossed paths with his kind before, pulling underdogs from the brink when the law looked away. "Sounds like wolves in suits," Ethan murmured, setting his mug down with a soft clink. "Your dad faced worse in the dunes, corruption that cost lives. We don't bend to it, ever." The group murmured agreement, Lena's eyes sharp with Medic's resolve. "We've got contacts, eyes in low places. Ride with us and we face it square." Marcus felt the pull intensify, the Overlook's vastness mirroring the ethical chasm yawning before him. Throwing a fight meant survival short-term, but selling his soul for scraps? It echoed the isolation he'd built, brick by bloody brick. Ethan's promise wasn't intrusion. It was the lifeline his father had foreseen, a redemption arc scripted in leather and loyalty. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows that danced like specters of choices past, Marcus stood, resolve hardening in his stance. "Then we ride to Reno, confront Kane before the qualifier. No more running shadows." The convoy revved to life once more, dust kicking up in golden plumes as they descended toward the basin's heart. But as they merged onto the highway, a black SUV materialized in the rear view, sleek, anonymous, tailing with predatory intent. Kane's eyes no doubt closing in, the road ahead twisted with peril, the promise demanding not just a stand, but a storm of justice against the gathering corruption. Bonds forged in dawn's light would be tested in fire, biker and fighter united in honor's unyielding grip. If this story's stirring something deep in you, hit that like button. It helps these tales of grit and heart reach more riders on the road. The highway sliced through the Badlands like a vein of black tar, the morning sun now a fierce orb climbing higher, turning the asphalt into a shimmering ribbon that stretched toward Reno's distant sprawl. The Iron Viper's convoy pushed forward in tight formation, engines thrumming with a purposeful rhythm that drowned out the fading echoes of the Overlook's revelations. Ethan Carver led the pack, his Harley cutting the wind with unerring precision, the serpent patch on his vest fluttering like a banner of resolve. Behind him, Marcus Hale rode shotgun on a borrowed cruiser, his grip firm on the handlebars, the fighter's body adapting to the road's relentless sway. The vibration coursed through him, syncing with the pulse of uncertainty in his chest. Kane's threats no longer abstract whispers, but a shadow manifesting in the black SUV that dogged their tail a quarter-mile back. Marcus glanced in the side mirror, the vehicle's tinted windows gleaming like obsidian eyes, unblinking amid the rising heat haze. It had appeared after the basin descent, weaving through sparse traffic with calculated aggression, never overtaking but always closing the gap just enough to remind them of its presence. "That's him!" Marcus shouted over the roar, his voice edged with the raw grit of the cage, but laced now with something deeper, fear, not for himself, but for the fragile bridge he'd just crossed. Ethan nodded, without turning, his salt and pepper ponytail whipping in the slipstream, eyes fixed on the horizon where the mountains shouldered the sky. He'd seen tales like this before, not random, but harbingers of the corruption that festered in shadows, the kind his brotherhood had uprooted time and again. The Vipers rode for the overlooked, their loyalty a shield against wolves in polished hides. Jax Harlan pulled alongside Marcus in a fluid lane shift, his lean frame hunched low over the bars, tribal ink on his scalp catching the sun like etched runes. "Stay tight," Jax called, his gravel voice carrying clear despite the wind's howl. "We loop the next interchange. Shake 'em if they push." Lena Torres brought up the rear, her bike a steady sentinel, saddlebag bulging with tools beyond the medical, encrypted radios, a few non-lethal deterrents honed from years of aid runs gone sideways. The convoy was small but unbreakable. 7 riders now, each a thread in the web of chosen family, bound by oaths that outlasted the scars of war. Marcus felt it acutely, this web wrapping around him like the leather jacket Jax had tossed him at the Overlook, its weight a tangible reminder that he wasn't riding alone anymore. The fighter's world had been solitary strikes and solo triumphs. This was harmony in motion, engines speaking a language of trust. As they approached the interchange, a sprawling cloverleaf of sun-baked ramps and faded signage, the SUV accelerated, its engine a muffled snarl closing the distance. Dust devils swirled in the median, kicked up by the convoy's wake, carrying the dry, mineral scent of the desert floor. Ethan signaled a split, half the group veering left toward a service road that snaked into scrubland, the rest holding the main artery. Marcus stuck with Ethan, heart pounding, as the SUV mirrored the move, tires humming with intent. "What now?" Marcus yelled, adrenaline sharpening his senses, the road's blur sharpening into focus, the glint of chain-link fences, the skeletal arms of yucca plants clawing the air. Ethan downshifted, the Harley's growl deepening to a predatory rumble. "We face it head-on. Your dad's way. No running, just truth." The service road narrowed, potholes jolting the bikes like aftershocks, forcing the SUV to slow as it barreled closer, its bulk ill-suited to the terrain. Jax and Lena fell back, flanking Marcus in a protective V, their presence a silent vow. "We've got your back." Memories surged in Marcus's mind. Unbidden and vivid, the faded photo of his father and Ethan, arms slung around each other in desert fatigues, grins defiant against the odds. He'd grown up resenting the absence, channeling it into punches that paid bills but hollowed the soul. Kane's world promised more, Vegas lights, financial salvation for Mum's endless treatments, but at what cost? Fixed fights meant betraying the fire his father had died defending, the moral stand Ethan embodied. The SUV loomed larger now, its horn blaring a warning that echoed off the rocks, but the Vipers held formation, unyielding as the Badlands themselves. Ethan eased off the throttle at a wide pullout, gravel crunching under tires as the convoy halted in a defensive arc. Bikes forming a wall of chrome and resolve. The SUV screeched to a stop 20 yards back, doors flinging open to disgorge 3 figures in crisp suits, faces hard under sunglasses, Kane's enforcers no doubt, the underbelly's muscle dressed for deception. The lead one, broad and square-jawed, stepped forward, hand raised in mock peace, but his eyes scanned the riders with the cold calculation of a predator cornered. "Hail," he barked, voice slicing the sudden quiet. "You think a joyride scares us? Qualifiers tomorrow. You show, or your mom's next bill comes with a collector we don't negotiate." The threat landed like a veiled strike, signs of aggression in the way his fingers twitched toward a concealed bulge at his hip. Marcus dismounted, legs steady despite the ride's toll, the sun's heat baking into his skin like a forge. He felt Ethan's hand on his shoulder, a grounding weight, and Jax's low murmur. "Breathe, brother. Words first." The fighter stepped up, the champ's fire tempered now by the road's lesson, strength not in isolation but alliance. "I'm done playing your game, Ruiz," Marcus said, naming the man from dimly lit backroom deals. "No throws. Tell Kane the stand's mine." The words carried the echo of the Overlook's cross, honor's quiet thunder. Ruiz sneered, but hesitation flickered. The Viper's numbers, their poised stillness, spoke of deeper threats, a network that didn't bend to bribes or bluffs. Ethan moved beside Marcus, his presence a pillar, scar glinting in the light. "We've seen your kind before," he said, voice low and resonant, like the earth's rumble. "Promises broken for profit, but blood holds true. Walk away, or the road turns witnesses against you." Lena radioed quietly, her voice a thread to the club's wider eyes, contacts in Reno's undercurrents, ready to shine light on Kane's shadows. The enforcers shifted, Ruiz's facade cracking as he glanced at the convoy's unblinking stares. No fists flew. This was Justice's prelude, ethical tension coiling tighter. With a curse, they retreated to the SUV, tires spinning gravel in retreat, the vehicle peeling back toward the highway like a defeated serpent. As dust settled, the riders remounted, engines igniting in unison, a chorus of redemption's advance. Marcus exhaled, the weight lifting fractionally, but the qualifier loomed, Kane's web unbroken. The bond with Ethan deepened in that standoff's wake, father to son through proxy, biker to fighter in shared oath. They pushed on toward Reno, the sun arcing overhead, casting long shadows that whispered of trials yet to come. Loyalty's fire burned brighter, ready to illuminate the corruption's heart, one moral stand at a time. But as the city's skyline sharpened on the horizon, a call crackled over Jax's radio, Kane's move escalating, pulling strings that threatened to ensnare them all. The promise demanded everything now, a reckoning forged in the crucible of chosen kin. The Reno skyline loomed like a mirage of steel and neon, jagged against the midday blaze that turned the approaching highway into a furnace of heat waves and exhaust. The Iron Viper's convoy sliced through the outskirts, engines a steady thunder rolling past strip malls and sun-bleached billboards hawking quick fixes and false dreams. Ethan Carver kept his eyes on the road, the familiar pull of the handlebars grounding him amid the rising stakes. But Jax's radio crackled again, Lena's voice cutting sharp over the static. Kane's pull-in strings, cops tipped off about suspicious riders at the arena. Enforcers inbound, and he's got Marcus's name on a no-show list. This is war, quiet-like. The words hung in the wind-whipped air, carrying the acrid tang of asphalt and urgency as the group tightened formation, a serpent coiling for the strike. Marcus Hale rode beside Ethan now, the borrowed cruiser humming under him like an extension of his resolve, the leather jacket chafing against skin still raw from the morning's ride. The fighter's world had narrowed to this, the cage awaiting in the arena's underbelly, not as a throne, but a battlefield where corruption's roots ran deep. Victor Kane, slick operator with a smile like polished chrome and eyes cold as Badlands nights, had built an empire on bent bouts and silenced voices, preying on talents like Marcus, whose fire made them valuable, then disposable. Mom's hospital bills flashed in his mind, the sterile beep of machines echoing the radio's warning, but so did the Overlook's cross, etched with his father's name, a reminder that some debts demanded more than compromise. "We end this today," Marcus said, his voice steady over the roar, the champ's edge honed now by the road's unyielding lesson. They pulled into the arena's shadow lot, a vast concrete expanse baking under the sun, dotted with semis and the distant clamor of setup crews hammering scaffolds. The Viper convoy dispersed strategically, Jax and Lena scouting the perimeter, their bikes idling low like watchful hounds, while two others hung back at the gates, emblems hidden but presence felt. Ethan killed his engine first, the sudden silence amplifying the pulse in his ears, the faint scent of popcorn and sweat drifting from the venue's vents. He dismounted with deliberate calm, his scar pulling tight as he faced Marcus. "Your stand, kid. We back it. But remember Hale's words. Fight for the light, not the dark." The biker's eyes held the depth of deserts crossed, a brother's vow alive in the Nevada glare. Inside the labyrinth of corridors, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects, casting harsh pools on linoleum scarred by years of footfalls and fury. Marcus led the way to the promoter's suite, Ethan a step behind, his boots echoing soft thunder against the din of distant cheers from early arrivals. Kane's door loomed at the end, frosted glass etched with gold lettering that screamed false prestige. Marcus pushed it open without knocking, the cool blast of air-conditioned air hitting them like a slap, laced with the sharp bite of expensive cologne and stale ambition. Victor Kane sat behind a mahogany desk, mid-40s with a tailored suit straining over his bulk, fingers steepled as he eyed them like specimens under glass. Two enforcers flanked him, Ruiz from the service road, nursing a bruised ego, and a wiry accomplice with a neck tattoo snaking toward his collar. "Hail!" Kane drawled, his voice smooth as oil on water, leaning back in a leather chair that creaked like a warning. "Brought the circus with you? Qualifiers in hours. You throw the first round, or your spotlight dims, permanently. Mom's treatments? Poof. Like that drifter ghosting after the funeral." The threat slithered out, casual cruelty wrapped in business, but Marcus felt Ethan's presence at his shoulder, a silent bulwark against the chill creeping up his spine. The room's walls closed in, posters of past champs mocking from their frames. But this wasn't isolation anymore. It was confrontation, the promise's fire kindling in his chest. "I'm done," Marcus said, stepping forward, his frame filling the doorway, the fighter's stance unyielding yet measured. No wild swing, just truth's quiet blade. "No throws, no deals. You prey on fighters like you preyed on my dad's memory, twisting oaths for profit, but blood runs deeper." Kane's smirk faltered, eyes flicking to Ethan, recognition dawning like a storm cloud. "Carver, the Viper relic. Thought you rode off into myth. This changes nothing. I've got the law in pocket, refs who owe me. Walk, or we bury you both." Ruiz shifted, hand hovering near his belt, the air thickening with the metallic tang of tension. But Ethan raised a hand, voice low and resonant as gravel under tires. "You've got paper trails, Kane. Whispers we turn to shouts, fixed bouts, threats logged by eyes you missed." Ethan's words carried the weight of the Viper's network. Lena's radio, linking to contacts in Reno's fringes. Jack's slipping evidence to unseen allies even now. Outside, the convoy's engines rumbled faintly, a distant reminder of loyalty's reach. Kane's face paled, the enforcers exchanging uneasy glances as a knock echoed, sharp, official. The door swung wider to reveal a pair of plainclothes officers, badges glinting, summoned not by Kane's strings, but the Viper's quiet pull. "Mr. Kane," the lead one said, voice flat as desert stone, "we need to talk about irregularities in your promotions. Step aside, Hale. You're clear for the ring." The suite erupted in sputters, Kane rising with a snarl, but the officers moved efficient, cuffing Ruiz mid-protest, the wiry one backing against the wall with hands raised. Marcus watched, the ethical coil unwinding in his gut, justice not forged in fists but in the light of exposure, the corruption peeled back like Badlands' skin under sun. Ethan nodded once, the scar softening in the fluorescent glow, Hale's promise fulfilled not in shadows, but in this stark clarity. "Your dad would be proud," he murmured as they exited, the corridor's buzz fading to the arena's growing roar. In the cage that night, under lights that blazed like judgment, Marcus fought true, each strike a testament to roots reclaimed, the crowd's cheers a thunder echoing the convoy's engines. No throws, no compromises. Victory came clean. The title shot his on merit, Mom's bills secured by a sponsor's genuine nod. Ethan watched from the stands, Jax and Lena at his sides, the Vipers a quiet phalanx amid the frenzy. As the final bell rang, Marcus raised his arms, eyes finding Ethan's across the sea of faces, a nod sealing the bond. biker and fighter, guardian and kin, redemption's arc complete. The Badlands waited beyond Reno's lights, the road calling them homeward, oaths honored in the dust and dawn. Family chosen endured, promises outlasting the storms, a legacy of silent stands against the gathering dark. In that unbreakable circle, honor's fire burned eternal, guiding the lost to light. Thank you for riding along on this journey of grit, loyalty, and heart. If these stories of redemption and chosen family resonate with you, hit that subscribe button and join us for more tales from the road.